Ooh, city builder colony sim strategy survival top-down villager management medieval economic trading game for us patient gamers. Today we're going to take a quick glimpse into Patron, Overseer Games' take on a less present or futuristic city sim. So grab your skirts, tussle them goose feathers, and put out them fires as we dip our supple toes into the extremely casual-friendly Patron. Hello ladies and gents, Jarek Defiler the Patient Gamer here. But wait, Jarek Defiler the Patient Gamer here. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, I have finally gotten around to setting up a simple workstation that presents you with my striking visage. Much thanks to my beautiful and amazing wife for purchasing some of these decorations you see behind me, as I have zero talent when it comes to decorating workspaces, or anything for that matter. Love you, baby. Maybe I'll put in some RGB lights, some cool gaming and anime figurines. I already got Zoro up there. A couple sex dolls or something, I don't know. Either way, I got Kramer over here in the corner, and Zoro's hanging out up there on the shelf, and Cersei's just like chilling. You know, she looks pretty nice, made out of blood and everything, and my wife got me this awesome sign, so, you know, love you, baby. If my sandpaper stubble and ever so slightly balding and receding hairline hasn't scared you off, welcome to my face, and please be sure to enjoy today's video. Patron, my patient gaming friend, city building sim that has a fairly casual bent to it if I say so myself. I've always been partial to city builders, Caesar 3 being my favorite, and so when I saw Patron was on sale on Steam, I snatched her up and finally got a few days to try her out. Now keep in mind this is from the perspective of a first impression, with the Mare, Nostrum, and Supporter Pack DLCs, which I got all in a bundle. I put about 16 hours into the game, which by city builder standards isn't even a drop in the bucket. That said, I must say it's pretty much exactly what I was looking for as an old patient gamer with very little time to play games these days. A nice, chill, casual experience. I was wanting something that I could just sit back and relax with, you know what I mean? And Patron did just that. I never felt rushed or stressed out because I was under attack by some army or frustrated because of resource-limited progression. The pacing in Patron is very forgiving, and it allows you to just have fun with it and just build stuff. Now that doesn't mean there aren't optimal ways to do things. In fact, I restarted my first playthrough for that very reason when I realized I botched my build. But once it clicks, it's pretty much smooth sailing for the most part, yeah. And you do have various customizable options to make your playthrough more difficult if you wish, so if those who are wanting a more challenging experience, have at it. I'll just be over here with my sippy cup. So like any city builder, Patron revolves around you organizing and expanding your town. There's a fairly robust research tree presented in horizontal fashion that allows you to unlock various buildings, passive enhancements, and decrees that you use influence to maintain through your town hall. Things like increased production rates for specific industries, more taxes, or an influx to migration so you can get more workers. Fun stuff. So every run will have you steadily moving along as you strategically place your industrial buildings, make sure they're outfitted with employees, and then design little neighborhoods where each house has access to all the proper amenities and services. Why is that important? Well, because there are various stats among your populace that you want to maintain. Things like happiness, health, religion, education, and whatnot are all important factors you have to take into account in order to keep your city running smoothly. You also have different types of citizens. You have the peasant class like me, then you have laborers, merchants, and gentry, the pseudo-nobles. Each class will require different comforts to maintain happiness, lest they become disgruntled and leave the city, having you find yourself in need of more workers. So in order to keep, say, the merchant class hanging around, you have to make sure you have an adequate amount of luxury goods such as jewelry or fine garments, as well as higher quality construction materials like bricks so you can upgrade the houses and other production facilities that they require. Also, as your run progresses, you get random events that will allow you to choose two outcomes that will also affect your citizens. So there may be an event of pirates coming to town and wanting to sell these wares that they undoubtedly garnered through not so legal means. Accepting this trade will find your merchant class more loyal, while your town's overall safety will take a hit. If you decide to cast them out or even arrest them in some cases, you'll find your peasant class to be more loyal while your safety may increase. And then the merchants will get a little bit pissed, so, you know, it's a give or take kind of thing. There's a variety of these events scattered throughout your playthrough, and it's a nice way to somewhat balance out the stats and requirements of your different citizen classes, as at times many of them may be at odds. For instance, the peasants and laborer class tend to be more loyal to the king of whom you are subject to, while the merchant class tends to be more loyal to free trade and money. So you have to take certain routes to make sure all classes maintain loyalty as well as religion, otherwise they will rebel or leave town, and we don't want that now, do we? What else do we have in this supple little city builder? Well, there is a great variety of buildings to construct, much more than I'm personally experienced with when it comes to city builders, to be honest. There is quite a lot of unique industries to unlock during your playthrough as you get deeper and deeper into the research tree. You'll start out with the basics: Forester's Camp for lumber, Iron Mine and Quarry for stone, and, well, iron, Hunter's Lodge for leather and venison, things like that. But as you progress, you'll get into the finer things, such as dye and candle workshops, gold mines, and apiaries for honey and wax. But with most unlocks comes a new branch of technology. So, for example, unlocking the apiary will now allow you to further fuel your candle workshops. Unlocking, say, quartz mining at the quarry will grant the ability to supply your glass shops that then can be used for jewelers and churches. Farmers and ranchers have a variety of unlocks as well, as that allows for different crops and animals, which have a large effect on what other industries might arise. Sugarcane, for example, only available with the Mare Nostrum DLC, or is it Nostrum? Nostrum? I have no idea. This will allow for many new options such as rum and jam. Yeah, pretty sweet. That's one thing I found really rather fun about Patron, the supply chain cohesion and how streamlined it is. Because again, Patron is a fairly casual city builder, I would say. The fun is in the progression, not so much extensively complex mechanics or underlying synergies that aren't so apparent on the surface. Know what I mean? Now, don't get me wrong, the game still has some depth to it, but I don't think they were going for some super complex macroeconomic fueled management structure here. Everything is pretty much on the surface and you know what you're getting without having to do some hard dives into wiki pages. In fact, the only wiki delving I had to do was to see if land fertility affected animal ranches. And spoiler alert, they don't. So yeah, everything is pretty straightforward and simple for a moron like me. Even the trading system, which tends to be the more complex mechanics of city builders, is really easy to grasp and set up imports and exports, and it's all done right out of the dock/harbor. The trading system is also very handy because if you're ever struggling with a certain resource that may be bungling up your production line, you can always just supplement it with trade so you never really feel like you're at a point where you're just screwed and can't do anything to proceed kind of thing, you know? Granted, you need to make sure you have enough funds to make those trades, but I found gold was probably the easiest thing to gain in Patron. Now, as the playthrough progresses, in the campaign anyways, you will start to unlock these fulfillment quests that will have you send specific goods to the front line of a battlefield that is happening right outside of your territory. This is presented on a sort of world map, I guess you could say, but it's not interactive or anything. You can't really do anything with it as far as I can tell. Various people, including your sister at one point, will just send you requests to fulfill for things like supplying troops, building barracks, or triage centers. And when you do fulfill each request, you will see certain things begin to populate on the map, which is kind of cool. But I have to be honest here, I didn't finish these as the requests get increasingly hefty with each fulfilled, and eventually I just couldn't be bothered to focus on it as I was just having more fun building stuff. Aesthetically, the game is very good looking with a quaint medieval graphical style and various weather patterns. Nothing to write home about, but it's good looking, you know, for what it is. And sometimes the stormy, rainy weather can be a bit distracting and cloud your vision somewhat, but it's not particularly egregious, it's just a little minor annoyance. The music is nice and chill, which is perfect for a city builder as you are spending lots of hours in the same space, and having some music that is accommodating in the background while not being distracting or annoying is key. That said, some tracks do come off as a little repetitive, but I wouldn't say it was a negative for the most part, as music is perhaps the most subjective thing on the planet. But when you have a skanky little monkey like me, who's the type of person that can listen to the same song over and over again and never get tired of it, I mean, I've listened to Root Woven Sanctuary I from the WoW soundtrack probably 100 times back to back in the past couple days, no problem. It's a bit telling that some tracks might distract me or annoy me because of the repetitiveness. But it's fine, really. As far as performance goes, I did have a crash once, but never again. That said, my hardware is fairly old at this point, I simply haven't taken the time to upgrade, so my playthrough was hovering around the 60 FPS range at max settings, which isn't great, but I'm sure newer builds won't have much issue here. I don't really care because it's a city builder. I'm not playing Elden Ring here where every frame counts, and I don't really care how it looks graphically that much, so, you know. And I guess this would be a good time to segue into the criticisms. For the most part, the building placement is fairly solid, but the game has some minor quality of life issues that can make some things frustrating. These aren't game breaking, mind you, but they are little annoyances that get somewhat tedious over time, especially when you're doing, you know, like a 3-hour playthrough or something like that. One such example is that of placing roads. When you try to put down a road template in a space that accepts it, it will show the road as green. before you can commit to the build. If you move a single tile or your template to a space that cannot house a road, it will turn that template red. Perfectly fine, makes sense, right? However, when this happens and the template turns red with most parts of it being green, like 1-2 tiles being red and the rest of it being green, you cannot simply submit the template as it is so that the space that allows for the road to be built will do so, while the red spaces won't, like you would see in most city builders. Instead, you have to restart from scratch by redoing the template, all while trying your damnedest to not hit a red tile. This is particularly egregious when you're placing extra long roads or sections that maneuver around buildings and things like that. That too is annoying, by the way, because the pathways that pop up when making the road turn is very janky and often goes in the least logical direction, forcing the template to automatically adjust in a weird way. Kind of strange. But this is very time consuming as a result and forces you to build roads in very intricate, minute sections to avoid the templates from screwing up, so lame. Another criticism I have is the game isn't the best at communicating information to the player when it comes to the goings-on of your citizens. For instance, the latter half of my playthrough was accompanied by this annoying little icon right here. Just look at this little shit sitting on the sidelines mocking me. So it says I could use some more free workers, but it never states how many. There was a point where I had over 100 free workers, which in this game seemed to be a lot to me. However, this icon would still be there. Thanks, I guess. There's also a communication issue when it comes to the happiness and requirements of your citizens. The game does have a decent UI, and the functionality is really good, and there's many stat screens showing all the values and whatnot, and you can check out who was born or died recently, the population for each class, things like education and luxury. You can even see the ages and sexes of every single citizen. Pretty cool. But they don't really tell you what problems each class may be having in a more detailed manner. So what do I mean by this? Well, you may be getting a tooltip pop up that says people are leaving because there's not enough luxury goods. But then you go to check your stockpile and you got plenty of luxury goods. You'll then check the stats screen and see that your luxury goods tab is actually maxed out on that particular class. Yet for some reason, the plebs are still bailing on you. And you have no idea why. Chain them up, 50 lashes, I say. So I would circumvent this by just buying a crap ton of more luxury goods and somehow that would fix it. Problem is, I can do that in my ultra novice super duper easy peasy beautiful cover girl mode due to having a copious amount of funds. But I worry about players that may be doing far more difficult runs, for they might not have the resources to just throw at the problem hoping it'll go away like the government of California. And sometimes the game will just say people are leaving without an explanation at all. So that was an annoying factor that popped up here and there, but the game does have tons of great information it communicates to the player overall. You could even upgrade buildings in the stat menus so you don't have to scout around the entire map searching for any that need to be upgraded. However, it just lacks on some finer details that are relevant, such as what thresholds are needed for meeting minimal criteria for your citizens before they get all pissy and cheat on you with another town. Another issue linked to buildings and road placement is not being able to adequately affirm the boundaries of any given building, meaning it will sometimes show that you can place a building, but it won't let you. This was most prevalent when placing the docks or harbor or anything with water, really. There were times I would see that there were no discrepancies for the placement criteria, but it just wouldn't let me do it. I would then have to exit out of the template, click it again, and then it would place it just fine. Guess this is more of a bug than a problem with the mechanics, to be fair, but it's still there. Criticism, right? The game also has some fairly lengthy load times as well. Don't think this is an issue with my hardware either, but it can take a minute or two to load up, and then another minute or two to just load your playthrough. And yeah, a minute or two might as well be a millennium in gamer time. I felt like I aged 70 years when loading my last run. I would have liked to see more housing upgrades, as housing shortages are a huge problem and always pop up, and it's fairly annoying because I have some really nice neighborhoods, but they always want more. So being able to turn those houses into more possibilities, like say villas in Caesar 3, would have been pretty freaking awesome. But right now you only have 4 variations. You got house, stone house, 2-story, and brick mansion. Not much. When it comes to housing and city builders, I very much prefer vertical expansion routes rather than horizontal. This allows for keeping more citizens happy in a smaller space, rather than trying to build tons of luxury neighborhoods all over the map that just take up so much space due to having to add universities and churches and schools and all that in order to give them all the amenities they need. A lot of these buildings take up a huge amount of space, so yeah, packing more people into homes would be nice. I'm talking like 1860s 5 Points Manhattan, 30 people to a room kind of thing, know what I'm saying? I'm also not sure if the distance between the housing and the inhabitants' workplace matters. Like when I first started, I was trying to finagle it so that the workers would be very close proximity to their workplace, so I would just put the housing like right next to, say, a mine. But then it would just be completely random as to who works there, because despite putting a house there, the citizens on the other side of the map decided to work there instead, and there didn't seem to be any way to control that. So that was a bit odd, but that said, I don't think it actually matters. Distance travel doesn't seem to be a factor of work efficiency outside of actual specializations of workers and carriers, I think, which is why you want to have depots and warehouses all over the place. Could be wrong though, no idea. Time is also a major factor in Patron, as research, building construction, production all takes quite a bit of time. This is why you have various game speeds going from 1 to 10x speed. That said, even 10x speed isn't enough sometimes, as it can take a long time to build things or get the production that you need, so you may find yourself waiting a great deal for certain stuff to get done, That said, there generally is always something else to do while you're waiting for the most part, so I guess it's not that big of a deal. Okay, with the criticisms out of the way, and despite them, Patron is a fun little city builder that caters very well to the casual gamers like me. And if you're new to the genre and are interested, you might want to give it a look, because it's a very chill, relaxing experience that I think would be great for learning what the city builder genre entails. Breakdown. And if you're a veteran of the genre, like yours truly, you still may very well get a lot of decent enjoyment out of this game. But don't expect the level of depth or detail we see in, say, Paradox games, know what I mean? So yeah, Patron, ladies and gentlemen, fun little meditative experience for the Bayesian gaming masses. And like always with my first impression and review videos, here's a snippet of the game's soundtrack. Today's music is brought to you by Serbian composer Nikola Nikita Jeremic, if I'm saying that correctly, whose contributions include some additions to Cyberpunk 2077, as well as Destiny 2 among quite a few others. This particular track is titled Winterborn. Enjoy. Thank you very much for watching this far into my first impression video, and the first video showing my pimply freckled face. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you'd be so kind, as it helps the little channels like mine grow. This has been Jarek Defiler, ruling over the peasantry masses. You all have a good morning, afternoon, evening, or night, depending on where you are. And go play some Patron. Breakdown.